Good morning, and it's time for today's AM Minnesota program. I'm certain it's going to be a very informative program today. We are going to be talking about a special program coming up here in September on farm transition planning. I want to kind of talk a little bit about that. And boy, what a privilege. We've got all the heavy hitters, 3 of them in studio and 1 on the line. Karen Anderson is Extension Educator in Rice and Steele County is in studio, along with Art Madsen from Alliance Bank, Bart Jackson from American Family Insurance in Faribault, and on the line is actually Gary Hackfield, who's going to be leading the program. And Gary, I think I punched all the numbers right. You were there, right?
Yes, I am.
How about that? I punched the numbers. Okay. Well, Karen, why don't you explain how this all came about? You kind of organized it, didn't you?
Sure. I saw this program that the University of Minnesota Extension has put together in the agribusiness management team with the University of Minnesota. And being an extension educator, it's my role to try to bring some of those main programming to my county areas. And my main focus is Rice and Steele County. And I saw a need in our county, so I approached the 2 gentlemen that we have here in the studio with us, along with Gary Hochfeld, and that's basically how we got the whole thing rolling.
And of course, early in the planning stages, well, you had to get Gary lined up because Gary, you're going to be leading the program.
Instructors. It is a all-day workshop, and so we have 2 instructors or 2 speakers, presenters. It's nice to see 2 rather than just 1 talking head, and kind of breaks the thing up just a bit.
And of course, it always takes the sponsors in addition to the need. And Art, that's kind of where you came in. Obviously, you work with a lot of farm families, and you've seen the need for this.
That's right, Jerry. I've also had the opportunity to participate in this program before, and saw the tremendous job that Gary and his team do putting on the program, and the tremendous workbook resource that these farm families get when they attend this program.
And Bart, that's kind of how you got involved. You worked with a lot of people in town, but you've really been expanding over the years, wanting to specialize in kind of working with rural families.
It's so true, and there's so many things that farms can do, farmers can talk to, and they just found that that's one big question I get a lot is, hey, do you know a good attorney, or do you know anybody that will be able to explain these things to our families? And that's one of the great parts of this program is now we're going to get educators, so it's going to be a little bit unbiased, and that will be very helpful for everybody when they come out there. They'll be able to hear the information, they'll be able to ask the questions, and they won't have someone there that's biased in that situation. They'll get all those good informations right from those educators.
Every once in a while, I get a letter that Louise and I are invited to something, and oh, they'll feed us a nice dinner, and you know that it's going to be probably a big sales pitch.
That's very, very true, Jerry. And one of the things I really like about this program that Gary and his peers put on is it is not a high-pressure sales program. It is an educational program. And you've also got Gary available as a resource. If you've got questions after the program, he'll visit with you. Or if you want to sit down with him and say, hey, we've got a complex issue in our family, will you come and meet with us and help us work through and figure out where we want to be before we go to legal counsel and get the documents drafted?
I think that's a key, isn't it, Gary, that you have to kind of know what you want before you actually go and start drawing up all of those legal documents?
Exactly, Jerry. That's why we begin the program talking about goals. That is what the farm families want to have happen to their business or personal assets, or probably more importantly, what they do not want to have happen to them. One of the reasons, and we've surveyed almost 6,000 people in 4 different states, 85% of them report that they do not have a business succession or transition plan. That concerns us a lot, and the reason is that we found that people try to focus on the details and do a lot of the work themselves, and they get so frustrated because it's so complex that they don't move forward. So the secret here is to do the goals, that have them prioritized, and then the second step is to call the attorney.
Well, Gary, if you can stand by, we have to take a break for the markets. It's not a good thing when the farm broadcaster misses a market break, right? We have the privilege of having a number of guests in the studio. Karen Anderson, extension educator in Rice and Steele County. Art Madsen with Reliance Bank in Faribault, and Bart Jackson with American Family Insurance in Faribault. And on the line, Gary Hackfold, who's an extension educator specializing in farm business management. And Gary, you cover a pretty big swath. It seems to me I listened to about 2 of your presentations here about a year ago. Should I go ARC County, ARC Individual, PLC? And you were pretty busy there for a while.
Yes, that whole farm program kept us, our team actually, and some additional folks, very busy. But I think we got the word out, and I think people made some good decisions given their situation. We'll see what happens when those payments begin to roll in, and we're contemplating and working on a calculator right now to help folks with that process to kind of determine what their payment might be and then use that for cash flow purposes. So an important decision, and hopefully we did our job correctly and gave them all the options and understanding of each.
Well, let's get back to the topic at hand, the Farm Transition Program coming up here. And I'm not sure, did we mention the exact date? I did say September. What is the exact date?
Sure. We are hosting it on Wednesday, September 9th, and it's going to be, we'll start right away at around 9:30 in the morning, and it is a full day program, so it'll be about 5 hours worth of education. We'll throw in some breaks in there as well. But we're hosting it at the Rice County Extension Office right there on the fairgrounds, and we hope that people will come out and get educated about this, because that's the last thing we want, is for people to fail to plan and then end up in a scenario where you have no plans laid out, and then now it's okay, now what situation.
And I'm sure, Gary, that you've seen it over your career that maybe nothing was done, and a family that did get along really well between the children and some that are involved in the farm, some that aren't. You've probably seen some disaster cases where it can tear the family apart.
That's absolutely right, Jerry. There have been circumstances where the farm has had to sell assets to pay off taxes. That could have been avoided had some planning been done. With the estate exclusions we have both at the federal and the state level, folks can transition $10 million without paying any estate tax, and that should cover the majority of farm families at this particular point, even with high land values. In addition, there are other situations where heirs don't receive what they think they're entitled to, and many of those things will break up the family so that the younger generation doesn't talk to one another, doesn't come together for Christmas and Thanksgiving, and those are unfortunate things. So if we can do some planning, we can avoid those kinds of things.
And I'm sure, Art, in your career, you've seen that happen many times where it broke up a family, or maybe a lot of assets had to be sold and the operation changed just because they found out that Dad and Mom worked a good chunk of their life to give it to Uncle Sam.
That's right, Jerry. The thing we have to remember is, if you don't have a plan, don't worry. Uncle Sam has one for you. And Uncle Sam's program will do its absolute best to extract as many dollars from that estate as possible. And in the 30 years I've been in the ag banking business, I have seen some things that would absolutely make you cry, and it certainly made family members cry, because it's a system that keeps changing. It's a complicated system. It's a system that requires some real planning and thought so that two things happen. So that A, Mom and Dad really know what's going to happen to those assets when they pass on, and B, that we do everything possible to maximize the after-tax value of that estate and explain to the children why the assets are being distributed as they are.
I think that's the key, and maybe, Gary, you've seen this too, that I've seen the old saying that you have some of the children involved in the farm and some have left the farm. You can't be equal, but you can be fair.
Yes, we do discuss that. We don't have the answers. The family has to figure that out themselves, but One of the reference pieces in the workbook that each couple receives, there is a sheet, and it has to do with contribution versus compensation. That is, if you've had one family member working with mom and dad for a number of years, how do you compensate them for that contribution? Again, allowing the business to grow, allowing mom and dad to amass an estate that is much bigger than they would have had that person not been farming with them, allowed them, mom and dad, maybe to stay on the farm where they would have had to move into town before. So we talk about that, and again, Art is very correct in that, we need to decide how those assets are passed, and fair may not mean equal. Those are two different issues.
Well, and then just looking at, because I'm old, I have a little bit of experience, but I remember when I was first farming, life insurance played a role in it. That my dad had life insurance on himself, that I would be the beneficiary to take care of the non-farming brothers and sisters. And as things transitioned, they got older, while it wasn't quite as important. And Bart, that's kind of where you can come in with some of those kinds of things to help for the folks that need it.
That's correct, and this nice thing is when we go out there, we can talk to folks and find out their comprehensive situation. We can discuss their needs and find a plan that works for them and for their budget. But most importantly, it's just take the time to look at those dollars that will be available, whether you want to pay 100% of the bill or you want to look at some discounted dollars. And everybody likes being able to get a good deal. That's where the life insurance comes in. It's available money, and it's a discounted dollar that you look into the future. You don't know when you're going to die, but the life insurance can be such a great asset because you're not paying 100% of that bill any longer. And you'll be able to preserve a lot of the money that's still left over for the farm and for that transition.
And then last January, Louise's brother died suddenly. And we found out that he did have a life insurance policy, and even though he didn't have a will, he thought some of these things out. He knew that Louise was going to have to sell the estate, so a little bit of it went to Louise to cover that. Another life insurance policy went to his estate to make sure that there was enough bills to pay everything. So he had been thinking about it, and it was instant ready cash.
Well, and another thing too is a lot of times farmers will buy their life insurance, especially when they're younger, and they feel that, hey, I have this taken care of, this is part of the business, I have it taken care of. But a lot of times, especially when they're life-only agents, there isn't a lot of follow-up. So sometimes that life insurance, even though it was wonderful at that time, may not be the right fit for them now. That's when they should talk to someone that can look at their farm needs and look at their life needs to correlate them, plus make sure that what they currently have is actually still adequate and maybe not defunded or about to expire. There's so many things about life insurance that, as a qualified person that has a license and goes through all the different trainings, and a life insurance advisor like myself can sit down and go over what you currently have so that there aren't going to be any surprises in the short-term future.
And Gary, but that was just one tool that helped my parents and us get through the hurdle to the next stage in life. But there are so many different tools, and not any one tool is right for every family.
That's absolutely correct. There's a whole bucket full of tools out there that folks need to look at. And again, that's why they need to do their prioritized goals list, because that is the first thing that the insurance agent, the attorney, the financial planner, the accountant are going to ask them for. What do you want to do? One other thing that I think I need to mention that's an unforgotten piece of this whole process is how do you plan to pay for long-term health care costs? Those costs are escalating at astronomical rates, and folks just tend not to think about that. Just had a call this morning from a woman whose husband had a stroke. She doesn't know, they don't have long-term care insurance. She doesn't know how she's going to take care of that. So that's in the area of elder law, so an elder law attorney needs to be working on that as well. I think that's just as important or more important than any tax issue at this point.
I don't know why it is, but many times we don't want to think about something bad happening, like I end up in a nursing home, or all at once my time is tomorrow. Many times we don't want to think about that, but maybe what could get us to think about that is what could happen to the family if we don't take care of things and plan. And I think that's a key. Just in our situation, when Dad and Mom did all of theirs, 6 of us were in that conference room. My sister couldn't. She was in California, but she was on conference call. And we went through the whole book. Every member of the family had an input, and the consultant was working with 7 children and dad and mom. And everybody knows now what's in that book and what's going to happen.
That is the key. We strongly suggest, as others have mentioned, that you share that plan, and mom and dad need to share that. There's 2 parts to that. First of all, they need to know what's in the plan, why it's in there, and what it does for them. They need to understand what they have. Many folks don't. The second part is to share it with the family. Now, the heirs may be upset with mom and dad, but at least they can discuss it. Mom and dad can say, these are our wishes, this is why we did it, and please don't fight when we're gone. We want you to come together. And that's going to solve that family conflict issue. Better that way than hearing it from the attorney after mom and dad have passed, and you can't ask them, why did you do this?
And I think the key is with this program, Gary, it's not like somebody can come and they're going to say, okay, we can jot down some things and our estate planning is done. This is more, as we alluded to earlier, educate you on the process so you know the right questions, and when you go to the legal counsel then to get things set up at $150, $200, $300 an hour, well, you're more organized, so you might save a lot of money with attorney's fees because you know what questions to ask or what decisions you have to make.
That's correct. Attorneys have told us that this is invaluable because people come in with their goals list. They're familiar with all the terms and the jargon and some of the rules and tax codes and things. That speeds up the process. It saves money for the farm family, saves them time. And attorneys don't like to bill folks for the time to explain all of this stuff. So that's why it's designed the way it is. It's to help the farm families get on with this process. They've worked many, many years to develop this. Let's preserve it and create a legacy for the next generation.
I think the other key too. Oh, Bart, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, one of my friends had me come and meet with his dad because they wanted to do this, go through this process with an attorney, and the dad was a little apprehensive and didn't want to take the time, and so I went and I was explaining a few things about how I've seen it with other families, and then the son says, Dad, you always do maintenance before you take the tractor out. You always clean the tractor and the equipment after and so that way when you start next time, you're not going to have all these horrible things that you have to do. Why can't we go ahead and do this now and get ahead of it, just like you do with all the maintenance and everything else?
Good analogy there, wasn't it, Gary?
That's excellent. In fact, I need to ask your permission to use that. It's a very, very excellent approach. It's being preemptive. Again, taking care of all those issues, or as best you can, given the current circumstances, and it's going to save a lot of grief, and it's going to keep the family together, keep the business together, and hopefully everyone will be happy.
And Art?
I'm not always the most popular person when it comes to meeting with families, especially as the heirs are concerned, because I'm of the opinion, and it's just my opinion, it's more than likely wrong, but I'm not sure my parents owe me anything. And I'm not sure that a lot of the heirs that are out there should say, gee, my parents owe me a portion of that estate. They raised me, they took care of me, they counseled me, they changed my diapers, they helped me get my first car, they probably helped me with my education in some way, shape, and form. And my first date, exactly, with my cousin. I really don't think parents owe, especially the non-farming child, anything. If they decide to give it to them, that's great. That's their opportunity to do so. But hey, let's sit back and take a look. Do they owe me something?
Well, we've seen this too, where sometimes if all at once some money's there, it has a tendency of bringing out the worst part of a person's personality. And I suppose, Gary, you've seen that from time to time too.
Yes, I have. Actually, I've seen that in my own family, and it is a bad situation. But again, part of that, and I'm not as bold as Art is, but I agree with him that yes, it's not written anywhere that we owe our kids an inheritance. And if our top goal on our list, our number one goal, is to keep the farm intact, and second goal is to pass it on to the next generation, then that has to be focused on, and there may not be enough, my metaphor is marbles, there may not be enough marbles to go around to get to everything, that is to treat all the kids financially equally. So you need to have that prioritized goals list and stick to that. That is your roadmap, your guiding star for everything that you do. So again, it's very important that if your goal is to keep the farm intact, then that dictates all of your actions, how it plays out.
And it's important too, isn't it, that maybe dad and mom are getting close to retirement and maybe all the children have left for other careers. It's still important that they do some planning on what's going to happen to these assets, isn't it, even though no one is going to be continuing with the farming operation?
Yes, that's true. And that's true especially if there's a farming heir. They need to do the same kind of estate planning and long-term health care planning as well. And I would suggest that all the heirs in the family do that as well because, again, they have families, they have assets, they want to protect those and pass those on to the next generation. So this is not just for mom and dad, it's multiple generational.
You spend a lot of time too, or at least talking to folks about trust. That's a phrase that we hear quite a bit as a way to preserve assets. In our personal situation, dad and mom don't own the land anymore. The trust does, but they own the trust.
Well, that would depend on what type of trust they use. Now, if they had a revocable or revocable living trust, they still own it. It's in their trust. I call it a bucket. It's one of the assets they put in there. If it's an irrevocable trust and they put the land in there, then that's true. They do not own it. They could get rent payments from that, but they don't own it. So those are two different animals. But again, depending on what their goals are, what they want to achieve, if they want to avoid probate, then you need to have a trust.
We always hear so much about probate that we want to avoid probate because typically you're just adding additional costs in. Is that the major drawback of probate?
There's probably three challenges with probate. First of all, on average, and this comes from probate records around the state at random, and there was a national survey as well, probate can take 12 to 18 months, so there is a time commitment there. It can cost up to 2 to 3% of the estate value for attorney and court costs. And thirdly, it's an open process. That is, the probate records are in the courthouse. Anyone can go in and, after someone is deceased, find out what their net worth was, how many assets they owned, what those assets were. So those are kind of the three things that people look at. If those three things are not an issue, it's a smaller estate, they don't care if people find out, then probate's fine. So again, it's predicated on what their goals are. What is it they're trying to achieve?
I would expect, though, maybe Art, has it been your experience, most families would like to avoid the issue of probate?
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that this program that Gary and his crew put on will help them understand and help them follow the path they want as far as how things are put together and the level of confidentiality that plan has.
How often should you be updating your plans? We alluded to it earlier in the program, Gary, about they keep changing tax laws and inheritances, and what was okay and you had it set up properly a few years ago might not be right anymore.
That's absolutely correct. I don't have a pat number of years, but I would say that people should at least look at their document every 2 years, whether it's a will or a trust. Many attorneys have an annual meeting of their clients and update them on law changes and things, and then say, here are some things that you need to look at changing in your will or your trust. So that's an annual process. Again, please don't develop that, stick it up on the shelf, and just forget about it, because that can cause just as many problems as not having a plan at all.
I might be kind of like that, where I can check that box. Okay, it's done, taken care of. Don't need to think about it anymore. 1, 2, 5, 10 years later.
Gary, if you might talk to us a little bit about the importance of what I'm going to call younger crew having this in order too. I know as I work with my clients, I always say, hey, do you have your estate, your transition plan in place? And the answer I get is, well, I'm only 45 or 54 or whatever the case may be. Talk to us about that.
Well, there's a number of issues with that, Art. I'm glad you brought that up. First of all, if that second generation generation owns any farm assets and they do not have a transition and estate plan, that can kill the business just as well as mom and dad not having any plan in place. So that's point number one. Point number two, if that next generation has minor children, children that are under the age of 18, and they have no estate plan, mom and dad are both killed in a car accident, someone on the children's behalf will have to go into the courts, and the court will get to appoint a guardian and a conservator. A guardian is someone that makes their care decisions. The conservator is the one that makes their financial decisions. And that could be someone that's not a member of the family. It's someone that the court works with, and it might be someone that you would not want making decisions for your children. And thirdly, again, Art, you mentioned it earlier, the state does have a will for everybody. It is not very kind to businesses. It's very inflexible. So assets may be, well, not maybe, they will be fragmented and sent to a number of different people. So again, can break up and harm the business. So there's a number of reasons for that next generation to have a plan as well.
Well, we only have a couple minutes left, so let's go over the details again, Karen, and how do we have to pre-register? I think we mentioned we did. Give us the details, Karen.
Sure. So we are having this on Wednesday, September 9th, and like I said, it is at the Rice County Extension Office on the fairgrounds, or the 4-H building as many people know it, and it's starting right away at 9:30 in the morning. Like I said, it's about a 5-hour program, so we should be wrapping up around 3:30, maybe a little later, depending on the conversations that we're having and the questions that are presented. I do want to mention we are requesting a small fee for this workshop. There's such great value to the things that will be presented from the information. We're also providing, you know, the location as well as the meal, on top of the fact that you will be walking away with a booklet of all the information that will be presented. And
I have it right here in my hot little hand. It
right.
is about an inch thick.
Right, and we're really trying to give you those essential things to get you started on this thought process and get you prepared for the future for your farming operation. So like I said, the cost for this workshop is $20 per farm unit. We encourage that next generation to come. They get in free no matter what, as long as there's one part of the family. Bring on that next generation, because we want them to be a part of this as well. Pre-register by the Friday before to Art Matson at Reliance Bank at 507-331-2493.
Or maybe you could get a hold of you at the extension office,
right.
Or Bart, you probably could get it lined up too.
Yep, we'll get it to where it needs to be.
Well, thank you, Karen, Art, Bart, and Gary. Thanks for your time.